Welcome and thank you for standing by. All participants are in listen-only mode. Today's webinar is being recorded and the recording will be posted publicly. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. Now I would like to turn the call over to your host, Erlene Dow. Erlene, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Victoria. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our September Local Employment Dynamics, or LED, webinar. On behalf of the U.S. Census Bureau and the LED Partnership, in collaboration with the Council for Community and Economic Research and the Labor Market Information Institute, it is my pleasure to welcome Jessica Brown as she presents Child Care over the Business Cycle. Jessica and her colleague Chris Herbst estimate the impact of microeconomic conditions on the child care market. They find that the industry is substantially more exposed to the business cycle than other low-wage industries and responds more strongly to negative shocks than positive ones. Indeed, child care employment requires more time to recover than the rest of the economy. Although the reduction in supply may pose difficulties for parents, evidence finds that center quality is countercyclical. When unemployment rates are higher, child care workers have on average higher levels of education and experience, turnover rates are lower, and consumer reviews on Yelp.com are higher. Jessica Brown is an assistant professor of economics at the Darla Moore School of Business at the University of South Carolina. Her primary research interests are in public and labor economics and economics of child care market. Brown received her PhD in economics from Princeton University in 2019. Chris Herbst is an Arizona State University Foundation professor in the School of Public Affairs and a faculty affiliate in the School of Social Work in the Watts College of Public Service and Community Solutions at ASU. He is also a research fellow at the Institute for the Study of Labor in Bonn, Germany, and a former visiting scholar in the School of Public Policy at Central European University in Budapest, Hungary. Herbst's research focuses on the evaluation of public policies within the U.S. social safety net. Specifically, he seeks to understand the ways in which redistributive tax and transfer programs affect the well-being of economically disadvantaged families. Current and previous projects have examined the impact of childcare, welfare, and tax policy on low-skilled women's employment and health trajectories, as well as on children's early cognitive and behavioral development. With that, I hand it over to Jessica.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Erlene, and thank you everyone for logging in today. Chris and I are excited to share our work, Child Care over the Business Cycle, with you all. So this paper studies the effect of the macroeconomy on the childcare market. There are a lot of reasons to expect that childcare would be affected by the macroeconomy. So first of all, most providers rely on parent fees in order to operate. And so if parents withdraw their children during recessions, then this reduced revenue could lead to layoffs of teachers or to facility closures. In addition, we would expect that the labor market for childcare workers could be affected by the macroeconomy, just as the labor market for other workers is. So this could affect turnover, teacher experience, and education levels. And any changes in the availability, stability, or quality of childcare have implications for child development and parental labor force participation, which is why we think it's really important to study these and how the macroeconomy might be affecting the childcare market. This is a particularly pressing issue today, coming out of the recession in 2020 and thinking ahead in case we go into another recession in the near future. So first, some graphical evidence showing that the child care market seems to be affected by the macroeconomy. In this plot, we have the unemployment rate plotted against the right axis, and then the number of child care employees plotted against the left axis. The child care employees included in this plot are primarily going to be center-based workers. The gray highlighting indicates recessions. So we see in general the number of child care workers is increasing over time, but that increase is slowed during recessions. And it remains flat for some time after recessions until the unemployment rate starts to decline. So we see here that the childcare market does seem to be responding to these macroeconomic conditions. When we think about the number of employees in the childcare market, we're thinking about this as a proxy for available slots for children, since childcare operates under strict ratio requirements. So I think that this is indicative of increasing slots over time where that increase slows during and after recessions. So in particular, the questions that we're going to be answering in this paper are what impacts does the macroeconomy have on childcare availability, proxied by this employment measure, and also the number of childcare establishments, on childcare stability, proxied by, again, the number of establishments, since if an establishment closes, that's going to cause disruption for any children who were enrolled there, and also looking at teacher turnover. So prior literature has found that lower turnover leads to improved children's outcomes in the context of Head Start preschools. And so we expect that lower turnover is going to allow children to establish better bonds with their child care providers and potentially lead to better outcomes. We'll also be looking at the effect of the macroeconomy on caregiver composition. So we're looking at this as the quality composition of caregivers over the business cycle. In the paper, we look at the effects on age of providers, thinking of this as a proxy for experience. Today, I'm going to present results on the educational composition of caregivers. And finally, we're going to be looking at consumer satisfaction as measured by Yelp reviews. In addition, we want to look at how quickly the childcare market recovers relative to the rest of the economy. I think this has important implications for policymakers because if the childcare market recovers alongside the rest of the economy, then the way that we get the childcare market up and running back to pre-recession levels is by improving the economy as a whole. But if it responds more slowly, then maybe there's room for some policy interventions that would maybe prevent the decline during recessions or help the childcare market rebuild after recessions. We're also going to benchmark these results against other similar low-wage industries, and also in one figure against all other 4-digit industries. We're going to answer these questions by bringing together several data sets, each with 20 to 30 years of data, which include multiple recessions. And we'll be exploiting primarily state year variation in unemployment rates in order to estimate this effect of the macroeconomy on the childcare market. As a quick preview of our results, we find that childcare is highly exposed to the business cycle. We estimate that childcare employment declines about 2 to 3% for each 1 percentage point increase in the unemployment rate, and that childcare establishments, the number of childcare establishments declines by about 1% for each 1 percentage point increase in the unemployment rate. This employment sensitivity is in the top quintile, so the top 20% of all 4-digit industries for which we have relatively complete data over this time period. So it's particularly the childcare market is particularly sensitive to the business cycle, even relative to all other industries. And we find that the childcare responds asymmetrically. So when the economy declines, childcare declines along with it. When the economy starts picking back up again, childcare does pick back up again, but not as quickly as the rest of the economy. So it declines as quickly as the rest of the economy, but it doesn't recover at the same rate. And finally, we find evidence that childcare quality is countercyclical. So higher unemployment rates are associated with modest increases in caregiver education and experience, with lower turnover, and with higher Yelp reviews from parents. Just a quick tour of the childcare market. So they're all on the same page when we talk about these different sectors. We're going to talk about 4 different sectors of the childcare market. Primarily, we're going to be talking about the center-based market, but there's also the school-based, home-based, and private household markets. And the coverage for each of these is going to vary across data sets. So first, in the center-based market, This is childcare taking place in non-residential buildings. It's highly regulated and usually has classrooms split by child age. When we talk about school-based childcare, we're talking primarily about preschool and after-school programs. Home-based childcare is childcare run out of an individual's home. You can think of this as a mom down the street who cares for additional children during the day. It's less regulated than center-based care, but it is still subject to regulations as long as there are enough children in the home, and that depends on the state when they start regulating that. And finally, private household sector of the market. These would be caregivers who come into children's homes. This is primarily nannies and au pairs. And in terms of quality, we generally think of the center-based market as being higher quality than the home-based market. There's previous work showing that across different measures, on average, center-based care is higher quality than home-based care. So if we see compositional changes in the market in terms of how much is center-based versus home-based, that would be another indicator potentially of the available quality in the market. Use 4 primary data sets for this analysis. The first is the QCEW, the Quarterly Census of Employment and Wages. This is going to be our preferred data set when possible because it has the longest time horizon and it has complete data, complete administrative data for all states in the country. This is going to give us industry level annual average employment in establishments we're going to be using at the state year level. It's derived again from administrative records from the unemployment insurance system. We'll be focusing on the child daycare services industry. This is industry code 6244. And this data set is primarily going to capture center-based workers. The next data set that we're going to be using is the QWI, or the Quarterly Workforce Indicators. The advantages of this data set are, first, that it allows us to look not just at stocks, but also at flows in employment. So we can look at turnovers, hires, and separations. In addition, it's going to allow us to look at any heterogeneous changes by education level. So we can say something about the educational composition of workers in the childcare industry. It's available for a shorter time horizon than the QCEW, starting in about 2000, where about 80% of the states are available. In addition, we also look at the American Community Survey, or ACS, for 2001 to 2019. Now, the advantage of this data set is that it's going to allow us to look at these 4 different sectors that I had mentioned. So the first 2 data sets are primarily about the center-based market. The ACS is going to allow us to look at all 4 different markets, in particular this home-based market that we might be interested in. And it will also allow us to look at heterogeneity by age and education. And finally, we're going to be using Yelp reviews from 2005 to 2017 from the 40 largest cities in the United States. We're going to think of these as a proxy for consumer satisfaction. And this is information that was scraped from the childcare and daycare businesses over this time period. Our primary regressions are regressions of the outcome of interest on the unemployment rate at the state year level, including time-fixed effects and state-fixed effects. Standard errors will be clustered at the state level. When we work with the ACS, we have individual level data instead of state level data, and so we'll be adding in a vector of individual characteristics as well. So the coefficient of interest here is going to be beta, and beta is going to identify the change in Y associated with a 1 percentage point change in the state unemployment rate, controlling for the state and time fixed effects. And so in particular, these time fixed effects are going to be controlling for any national macroeconomic conditions. So beta is specifically going to be identifying the effect of changes in the local unemployment rate, holding these national conditions constant. Our first table of results here, the outcome variable is log of employment. If you go all the way to the right in column 7, we see that a 1 percentage point increase in the unemployment rate is associated with a 1.2% decrease in employment across all industries. Looking specifically at childcare, a 1 percentage point increase in the unemployment rate is associated with about a 3% decrease in the employment in the childcare sector specifically. And so we see that that's a larger decline than overall. The other sectors we have here, so the household sector is going to include nannies, although it's also going to include a lot of other workers as well. We see the point estimate shows a similar decline, but we don't have as many observations for this industry due to a classification change partway through our sample. And so because of that, the standard error is larger and that decline is not statistically significant. The next industry here is schools. So this is going to include school-based childcare workers, but this is predominantly going to be teachers and other school employees. And that decline there is about 1.4%, but again, it's not statistically significant. We also compared it to the clothing and restaurant industries. These are going to be low-wage industries where we think that wages are maybe kind of similar to the childcare market. And we don't see the same response in those industries as we do in childcare. Now this figure is applying those beta coefficients for all 4-digit industries for which we have relatively complete data over this time period. And so we can see that childcare is one of the most affected industries by downturns, by economic downturns. And so it wasn't just that we happened to choose industries that weren't as affected as childcare. It really does look like childcare is one of the more affected industries across all 4-digit industries. Turning to the ACS, which is going to allow us to look at changes across these different sectors in childcare. The outcome variable here is going to be an indicator that equals 1 if a woman is employed in the indicated sector and equals 0 if they're not. So in the first column, this is whether a woman is employed at all. So we'd interpret this as a 1 percentage point increase in the unemployment rate is associated with about a 0.5 percentage point decline in the probability that a woman is employed in any kind of employment. In the brackets underneath, we show that effect as a percent of the mean. So this is about a 0.6% decline. The second column indicates whether they are employed in any of the childcare sectors. We don't see overall much of an effect there. But when we go to the center-based market in column 3, we do see a decline, just as we did in the QCEW. So in the QCEW, we saw about a 3% decline in center-based employment. Here we see about a 2% decline. We don't see much change in the probability of a woman being employed in household childcare market or in home-based or school-based childcare markets. And so this is indicative of a change in the sectoral composition where the center-based market is making up a smaller part of the market during these downturns. Turning to establishments, these are going to be interpreted in the same way as the other regressions using the QCW looking at employment. So here we see a 1 percentage point increase in the unemployment rate is associated with about a 1% decline in the number of childcare establishments. You can see that in column 1. The remaining industries that we look at, none of these results are statistically significant. So childcare is particularly affected on the employment margin and also on this extensive margin on establishments closing during recessions. And again, we can think about this as a proxy for both the availability of care, so there are fewer establishments that parents can go to, and also the stability of care because closing a child care provider closing can be disruptive to those children and families. Turning to turnover, here we're going to present graphical evidence. The paper also looks at some regressions. So in the dark black line, kind of in the middle, as plots the turnover in the childcare market. So childcare is a relatively high turnover industry. The medium gray line below that is all industries combined. And we see that just like other industries, turnover declines in the childcare market during recessions. And it takes a little bit of time before turnover starts to pick back up again after recessions. In regressions, we estimate there are about 2,000 fewer childcare workers per quarter leaving the industry per 1 percentage point increase in the unemployment rate. And so this decline in turnover during recessions, again, might be good for child development since we know that these stable bonds with caregivers are really important in the early years. Now we're turning to results on the educational composition of childcare workers. So here our outcome of interest is the fraction of workers in that sector who have at least some college or more. This is going to be restricted to employees who are ages 25 and older. We see looking at column 7 that overall a 1 percentage point increase in the unemployment rate is associated with a 0.2 percentage point increase in the fraction of employees who have at least some college. In childcare, it's somewhat similar, slightly smaller. A 1 percentage point increase in the unemployment rate is associated with a 0.17 percentage point increase in the fraction of workers with at least some college or more. We see some increases also, statistically significant increases in the restaurant industry and in manufacturing. And so we think that more highly educated workers, that might be better for child development as well. We also look, I'm not sharing these results here from the ACS, but we also look at this same question in the ACS and find similar results. We see that childcare workers with more education and also more experience proxied by age are less exposed to the business cycle. And finally, looking at consumer satisfaction as proxied by these Yelp reviews, we find that Yelp reviews are higher when the unemployment rate is higher. So here we're looking at the probability that a parent gave the highest rating on Yelp. So 1 percentage point increase in the unemployment rate is associated with about a 1 percentage point increase in the probability that parents gave their facility the highest rating. Now, this is in the first column, we control for county fixed effects. And so this could be about a compositional change in the market. So maybe the poor performing centers are the ones who are closing. And so the ones that remain open that the parents are rating are higher quality. And so that's why the ratings are improving. So in the second column, instead of controlling for county fixed effects, instead we control for firm fixed effects. And we actually still see within firm an increase the probability that parents are giving the highest rating on Yelp when the unemployment rate is higher. So this might be reflective of that lower turnover and higher education levels that we're seeing in the other regressions. You don't see very much heterogeneity in this in columns 3 and 4 when we look at looking at lower income areas and areas with different fractions of non-white residents. And one last set of analyses are what we call employment betas. And here we're regressing the change in log employment in the childcare market. We also look at other markets on the change in log employment in all remaining sectors, and controlling for these time fixed effects and state fixed effects. We interpret this beta as a 1% change in overall employment is associated with a beta percent change in childcare employment. The nice thing here that this is going to allow us to do is to split up the effects by whether the economy is improving or whether it's declining. So we're going to split this beta into a beta for when the change in employment overall is increasing from one time period to the next versus for when it's declining. So this is where we're going to be able to check for that asymmetry to see whether on the childcare market declines and then improves symmetrically with the rest of the market. So here we have these results for those employment betas. We're using the same industries as before. So in the first panel, these are the employment betas overall. So a 1% increase in employment is associated with a 0.8% increase in employment in the childcare sector. And you can see other results for the other industries as well. Looks like childcare is more responsive because it has a larger beta than these other industries. In panel B, we split these betas by when total employment is increasing or decreasing. And this is where we see that asymmetry in the childcare market. So a 1% increase in childcare, in employment in other sectors other than childcare is associated with a 0.7% increase in employment in the childcare market, whereas a 1% decrease in industries other than childcare is associated with a 1% decrease in the employment in the childcare market. And so this is where you see that asymmetry where childcare declines with the rest of the economy, but it doesn't pick back up again at that same rate. And across these different industries that we look at, the other two industries that have potentially childcare workers, and then in columns 4 and 5, other low-wage industries, we don't observe quite the same degree of asymmetry as we do in the childcare market. And again, we think this is potentially important for policymakers since the childcare market does not pick back up again with the rest of the economy. That may make it more difficult for parents to get back to work after a recession. And finally, we look at the robustness of this result. So the QCEW also allows us to look at the county level data. In the paper, we use the state level, or we primarily use the state level data because it's complete. Once we get to the county level data, some cells are suppressed. But we also look at the county level data and check for robustness of this asymmetry. And we find that it is definitely robust to using this county level data and different specifications for the county level data. And finally, I just wanted to wrap up with showing you where we are at with the childcare market today. So in this plot, I've plotted the seasonally adjusted employment relative to January 2020 for all non-farm employment in the blue and for childcare employment in the orange. So you see in April 2020, those large declines in employment in all employment and especially in childcare. And all employment has now rebounded. We're back up to where we were before the recession now for all employment, but the childcare market has not fully recovered. So our data is looking historically at recessions before the 2020 recession, but it does seem like the 2020 recession has played out similarly with the childcare market not fully bouncing back with the rest of the economy. So in conclusion, we find that the childcare market is highly exposed to the business cycle, more so than other industries. We find that this response is asymmetric, that the childcare industry recovers more slowly than other industries. And we also find evidence that childcare quality is countercyclical, that when unemployment rates are higher, caregiver education and experience are higher, there's lower turnover, and consumers are more satisfied with their childcare, as indicated by higher Yelp reviews. So thank you so much. Feel free to contact us with any questions, and we'll be happy to take your questions now. So Erlene, we're ready for whatever questions there are.
Great. Thank you, Jessica. So before we get to the questions in the Q&A, we've received a few questions regarding the presentations, which will be accessible on the Census Academy website in a week or two at census.gov/academy under the webinar tab. Victoria has already put the link in the chat, and also she also added another link for your feedback so we can better serve you. So please type all your questions in the Q&A, and at this time, you've noticed that the chat has been disabled. We have a few questions already. The first question is, did you compare the proxy measures for availability against the number of young children in a given geography and period?
Okay, so did we normalize by the number of children? No, we did not do that. We expect it to be relatively stable over time, although it is true that birth rates fall during recessions. We don't think that that's what's driving the results because it would take some time for those falling birth rates to be translated into a lower need for childcare, since childcare is generally 0 to 5, and the birth rates are going to affect the infants.
Okay, the second question is, did you look at the pandemic period or just 2019 and earlier years?
We just went through 2019. So at the time, we didn't have the data for the pandemic recession. We also expect that maybe it would be somewhat unique given the particular pressures on the childcare market from the pandemic, the additional regulations that were put on childcare in terms of staff ratios and cleaning that were maybe different from prior recessions. But as you saw in that last slide, it does look like childcare experienced a similar pattern in the 2020 recession as it has historically.
Okay, next question is, how is the turnover rate defined?
So turnover is hires plus separations divided by the number of employees divided by 2.
Okay, great. The next question is, why not use unemployment rate in T-1 or T-2 quarterly instead of T, since it might take a while for the child care market to adjust?
Yeah, that's true. We didn't do that, and so that's definitely something that we could look into doing in the future.
Okay, next question is, do you see any correlation between the closing of child care programs and its effect on other industries and communities?
Yeah, so we don't look at that in the paper. It would be pretty difficult, I think, to disentangle the effect of the childcare closures from just the general effects of the economy declining overall. But that's definitely something that's in the back of our minds, and that would be interesting to think about, especially as we see the childcare market not fully recovering during when the economy is picking back up again.
Okay. Next question is, why was Yelp chosen over other review aggregator sites?
So the honest answer to that is the availability of the data. So Chris had scraped that Yelp data for a previous project, so we thought it would be cool to look at for this project as well.
Do you think that Yelp reviews are changing because of the clients who are still seeking care of their children during recessions are different in some ways, if their expectation preferences are different?
Yeah, so that could definitely be true. One thing I didn't mention is that for the Yelp regressions, we do control for the characteristics that we have available. So we are doing our best to control for different characteristics that might be changing over the business cycle, but we certainly can't fully control for that. But that's why we talk about this as being consumer satisfaction. It could also be like match quality. Maybe parents are able to better able to get their children into the programs that they want if wait lists are shorter. So there are definitely some different possible explanations for those changing Yelp reviews.
And the final question I have currently is, can someone write or repeat that formula for turnover?
Sure. So it was hires plus separations divided by 2, divided by stable employment.
All right, I am not showing any more questions in the queue. Going once. Oh, spoke too soon. Another question. For home-based care, did you look at the non-employer data for NAICS 6244? Just wondering what you used.
Chris, are you able to answer that one? Chris was the one who coded the home-based employment in the ACS.
Do you need me to repeat it?
Yeah. Could you repeat it?
Sure. For home-based care, did you look at the non-employer data for NAICS 6244? Just wondering. And then it says, just wondering what you used. And that's it.
So to code home-based workers, which were used exclusively in our analyses based on the American Community Survey, I don't recall the industry and occupation codes offhand, but basically what we did was, if people were self-employed and their occupations were a child care worker or an education administrator in the child daycare services industry, then they were coded as a home-based workers, as a home-based worker. There were a few other criteria, but that was the sort of key set of criteria that we used.
And Chris, I'm sorry, there was a follow-up to that answer, or question. It says, I was asking about the Census Bureau economic survey for establishments. I'm guessing not.
Yeah, for establishments, whether that was in the analysis of the QCEW or the QWI, we looked at just the industry code 6244, which is the child daycare services industry.
And then I think this is all together. So the next question is, so 2 surveys, one for employer statistics and the other is for non-employer, parentheses, sole proprietors, parentheses.
So in the QCEW, our data is only going to be including people who are eligible for UI, and typically home-based workers are not eligible for UI, so they're not in that data.
All right, I have another question. Could the increase in child care satisfaction be coming from peer effects? The children left in daycare during a recession are from relatively well-off parents or tend to have fewer behavioral needs.
Sure, it certainly could be.
All right. And are there any more questions? Okay. I will take that as a no. So I just want to say thank you, Jessica, and thank you, Chris. And then I just wanted to also say what a very fascinating presentation that was. Jessica, would you like to make any closing remarks?
Not this time. Thank you so much for having us.
Okay. Chris, how about you?
Nothing here. Thanks again for the invitation and for everyone's participation and questions. Really appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you, guys. All right. Well, please join us next month, Wednesday, October 19 at 1:30 p.m. when Gail Krumenaar presents Disparate Impacts of the Pandemic Recession Using Census Data. Until next time, thank you for spending your afternoon with us and enjoy the rest of your day.
This concludes today's webinar. Thank you for participating. You may disconnect at this time.